So today the last 2 weeks we've talked about Proposition 106, and today I want to broaden our topic a little bit. And today we're going to talk about how does a Christian approach politics. Now some of you are like, uh-oh, a little nervous, you'll be okay, I promise. I'm not going to endorse a candidate or a party. That's about the one thing I can't do in our country. Christians need to be involved in politics. And what I love telling people who say they shouldn't be is that it's kind of twofold, and that's a little bit of what this homily is about. But the first thing I always say to people is that Christianity has always been political. Always. Jesus Christ was crucified on a political charge. In John 18 and 19, the charge against Jesus is that he has set himself up as a king against Caesar. The word Messiah, right? The word Messiah is a Hebrew word. Do you know what it means? This means yes. It means king. The Greek translation of the word Messiah from Hebrew and Greek is Christ. And so every time you say Jesus the Christ is not his last name, it's title. It means Jesus the King. And I hate to tell you this, well, not really, I kind of like it. But the title King is a political title. It's political. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what does it mean to be a Christian? How do you and I in our times come to know how a Christian interacts in the political realm? Imagine, those movies where you have the special ops kind of forces, and they're flying over somewhere, and they're dropped in by night. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Right, I'm going to do that one of these days. But imagine you were dropped into a battlefield, and there's a battle around you, and you didn't know who was who. That'd be a really bad situation. One of the first things you need to know if you're in a battlefield is you need to know who's who. Who's on the field? Do I know who my enemies and who my friends are? It's really important. You and I, in the modern world and in the political realm, brothers and sisters, there's a battlefield out there. And too often people don't understand who is on the field and what ideas are on the field. And the basic points, if you take one point home today, what I want to drive home is that every single human being has a worldview. Every single one of us. What's a worldview? A worldview is a little bit like a religion. It's a way that we see the world. A worldview is a set of assumptions about what the world is about, what life is about, and the nature of reality. One of my favorite scholars, a guy named N.T. Wright, he has this wonderful analogy. He says, a worldview is a lot like a pair of glasses. Now for you, those of you who don't have glasses, I hate you. I'm just kidding. But if you don't have glasses, you might not know this, but what's true about glasses is that you don't very often look at your glasses, you look through them. That's a worldview. A worldview are assumptions about the basic meaning of reality and life. And every single person has them. So Christianity is a worldview. It's a set of beliefs and assumptions about basic truths about what the world is, what life is about right and wrong, good and evil, God and the world. And everyone has a worldview. Everyone. And we're going to talk about two of them today. And one of my goals today that I want you to have confidence about, brothers and sisters, is that when someone says you can't speak to an issue because you're a Christian and therefore biased, I want to give you great confidence that to have a bias or a worldview is to be a human being. We are no more biased than anyone else. And when someone tells you that you can't speak to something because you're a Christian, it's a sure sign that someone has run out of good arguments. It's a bowling move. It's what happened when you were in 4th grade and someone told you you're not allowed to speak. And you and I shouldn't stand for that. So let's talk about some of those glasses that are out there today. What are the predominant worldviews that people look at the world through? And one of the biggest and most important things about this, what's dangerous and powerful about a worldview, is that most people don't recognize they have them. When I was a missionary and I was first learning some of these things, we used to talk about the men and women who rule the world from the grave. Many of the ideas that people, the categories people think in our time, come from centuries earlier. Influential philosophers and political thinkers who were hugely controversial. But today people just think that that's a neutral fact. And what makes that so dangerous is people don't even know they have these things. So let's talk about them. There are 2 dominant worldviews in our culture today. Modernity, or in the Enlightenment view, and postmodernity. And we will talk about both of those. So first, modernism. Modernism, or it's oftentimes called the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is a period that ran for a couple centuries, roughly from 17th century to middle of the 20th century. It's still alive today, though. And it's a worldview, and we'll dive into it. But when you think of the modernist worldview, think of Sherlock Holmes. The Enlightenment worldview was that the problem with the world is basically people aren't educated enough. The Enlightenment said that if we can just get people to embrace a scientific way of thinking, right, the problems with the world will go away. That's the Enlightenment. And the buzzword that the Enlightenment used over and over again, and it goes all the way back to its beginnings, the buzzword it used was progress. And so the world's just going to go from good to better to better. The Enlightenment had a lot of good things about it, but it was deeply anti-Christian. Deeply. And what it was big on was that, you can believe in a God, that's fine. But let's kick God out of earth into heaven. You can have a God, that's fine, as long as he stays out of earth, where we're going to run things. That's the Enlightenment. The idea of Christians not being able to speak in the public square is a philosophical position. It was a power move, really, invented by the Enlightenment. That's a worldview. That's an assumption. By the way, the Enlightenment or modernism, it named itself, right? It gave itself that nickname of the Enlightenment. And that's where we get the term for the Christian ages, in the high Christian ages of civilization of Western Europe. They called those the Dark Ages. And they called themselves the Enlightenment. Those are not neutral terms, right? My best friend from my childhood, some of you have heard this story. My best friend from my childhood, Eric Schmidt, total chump, love him to death. We roomed together for 2 years in college. And one time in college, at CU, he came downstairs in our little condo, and he announced to all of our roommates and me, he said, "Guys, I've been thinking about this, and from now on, I've decided my nickname will be Sweetness." Right, you can imagine our response. I was like, okay, number one, there's someone who already has that nickname, Walter Payton. Secondly, you aren't anything but sweetness, right? I've lived with you, I know you, you are not sweetness, right? You can't give yourself your own nickname, but the Enlightenment did. Why does this matter today? Why is the Enlightenment so important? The Enlightenment believes when you meet people today and they talk about your progress, and we're just going to move from good to better. That's the Enlightenment speaking. The Enlightenment has some major problems with it. And the chief one is that it thinks that the problem with the world is a certain matter of just becoming smarter. If we just be like Sherlock Holmes, if we get the right processes in place, the right procedures, then everything is great. Guess what it can't deal with? It cannot deal with the problem of evil. It simply can't. The Enlightenment promised the world when it happened there would never be wars again, because now we're scientific. Now we think more rationally. We've done away with religious superstition, and so we're just going to progress from better to better to better. And then World War I and World War II. And for people who care about philosophy, the Enlightenment worldview died on the battlefields of World War I and World War II. Because we learned in a horrific way the problem with the world is not predominantly about being smart enough. There is such a thing as evil. And Christianity has long said the real problem with the world, education is great, we always push for that, that's a very good thing. But the real problem with the world is not lack of education. The real problem with the world is sin. We have plenty of scientists, as any scientists today, right? Science does not get rid of the problem of evil. We also learned that in the Cold War, when we grew so smart that we could invent weapons that would destroy all of humanity. And my one-liner for, if you want to think about this problem of modernism, is that no system and no law, no set of laws can make a nation good if its people are not good. Right? The people of the United States, if we don't care about morality and goodness and truth and right, no set of laws, no technology, no amount of wealth will make things the way they should be. So that's the first problem. That's the first worldview out there. There's good things in Enlightenment modernism, but there's problems. The second worldview, the second set of glasses that people look at the world through today is called postmodernism. And so postmodernism rises up after the world wars. And what it says is, it says, that whole thing about, us getting better and better and progressing was all a lie. By the way, let me say one more thing about modernism that I missed. Let me go back. One more thing about modernism. People say to you as a Catholic, they'll say, you Christians, you have all these problems, you're so biased. Look at the Crusades, the Inquisition, look at the priest scandals. When I'm fired up, as I kind of am right now, when people push those buttons, you know what I say to them? I tell them, I will accept all of those, and I will own them as a Christian, and I will apologize for them, as soon as you, as a secularist, realize that your worldview is responsible for Hitler, Stalin, and Mao Zedong, which it is. Those atrocities of the 20th century came from a modern worldview. Everyone's biased. Everyone has a worldview. Sometimes the only difference is that Christians actually admit that they have a way they see the world. So postmodernism sees all the problems of modernism and says, this is all a lie. And postmodernism swings to the opposite extreme. So modernity says we're marching onward to truth and justice and everything's going to be perfect. Modernism says it's all a lie and there is no truth. There is no truth. There's only perspectives. That's what postmodernism says. My favorite example of this is when you think of the play Wicked. And in the play Wicked, right, the whole premise is that in The Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West wasn't really wicked. It was just a matter of perspective. And if you view things from her angle, she was really good. And so, in an ironic way, postmodernity says there is no right and wrong, there's just perspectives, which leads to this thing that you and I like to call moral relativism, which is rampant in our culture. And it says, we all have different perspectives, and guess what? There is no truth. So can't we all just get along, right? Have you ever seen those bumper stickers that say tolerance? I always try to hit those people when I see them. No, tolerance, right? If that bumper sticker meant what it says, I'm fine with it. But it's not what it means. They have a religious symbol for every letter of tolerance spelled out. And what that bumper sticker is saying is there is no truth. There's no truth, there's just perspectives. And so can you religious people just get along? And I think religious people should get along. The weakness of postmodernism is that you and I and every human being was created to seek truth. And truth is hardwired into our hearts and our minds and our souls. And humanity will never stop looking for it. And postmodernism is cynical and skeptical. And it refuses to acknowledge that there's a chance that you and I could find the truth. Those are the two main worldviews. And so, brothers and sisters, you and I as Christians, we need to acknowledge that. We need to know what's out there. We need to learn our faith on a deeper level. Jesus Christ is political. He has assumptions about the way the world works, about who God is, about what life is about. And it's so important for us, right? 1 Corinthians 2:16. We have the mind of Christ. You and I see the world the way Christ sees the world. We think the way that Jesus Christ thinks. Early Christians were persecuted as a religious sect that was dangerous to the security of the empire. If you call Jesus Lord, that means Caesar is not. I want to just briefly this morning, I want to talk about the most important issue in our country. Right? You heard me say last week, if you were here, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says, you are the salt of the earth. What does that mean? It means that Christians preserve society. By our love for truth and goodness and beauty, by our wisdom that is not ours but comes from God, we help the world to be preserved. The most important issue for any Christian, period, right now in our culture is the issue of life. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but I will tell you, you must be a person of life. We kill 1 million children in the womb every year in this country. 1 million. Let me just go on one rumor about that, by the way, that's false. A lot of people say, the Catholic Church will require a woman who's going to die in childbirth to die rather than lose that child. That's not true. Read the Catechism. Read the Catechism. Even if we granted that, even if that were the case, which is not, guess what? 99.5% of abortions in this country have nothing to do with a woman's health. They have nothing to do with extreme cases like rape or incest. Nothing to do with those things. Over 99% of abortions in this country are normal. There's no threat to the mother. It's doing away with a problem. You and I stand for life. The other issue, Proposition 106, we've been talking about this for weeks. If you are a person of life, that means you respect the dignity and the mystery of a human life in all of its stages, as Jesus Christ does. A human life is beyond value. It has a dignity that we can never violate, even if it's someone who is suffering or near death. It is always wrong to kill innocent human life, no exception. Always. That's a principle. And so finally this morning, brothers and sisters, I want to leave you with this, though. It's easy for us to get down right now in our country. And I want to read you an N.T. Wright, who, some of the things I've said today are from him. In one of his essays, he says this, and he's talking about the scriptures. And he says, this is the image which haunts Isaiah, the prophet Daniel, and the Psalms. In those books, the trees of the field shout for joy because God is coming to sort the mess out. He's coming to put the world to rights. And we all know in our bones that that is what we want. And the folly of empire is the attempt to do here and now in our own strength and without reference to God, that which God has promised that He will do through His Son and by His Spirit. The government is not supposed to put the world to rights. God is. And so are Christians. So you and I, we vote, we have a public voice, we care about the world. But the one who's going to set the world right is not neither Trump nor Hillary. I don't think anyone thinks that anyways. The one who's going to put the world to rights is named Jesus Christ. The most important thing you can do in your life, I hope you vote, I hope you fight for what's good and true and beautiful in our country. Woe to us if we don't. But brothers and sisters, I'm convinced the most important work you do in your life is what you do with your faith. A country cannot be good if its people are not. If they don't believe in virtue and truth and goodness and beauty, no president will fix that. What we do at Our Lady of Lords, I am convinced, this is why I'm a priest. This is more important than anything you can do. And so, Jesus, you are our King, you alone. We love you. Lord, we ask you to send your Spirit that we would think like you think, that we would see the world the way you see it, that the problem with the world is not financial or primarily systems. The problem with the world is evil. Lord, may we be your solution. May we become holy. May we build up your kingdom here on earth.